The following information is intended for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice. The views expressed do not reflect those of this broadcaster. Should you choose to implement this information, please do so only with the assistance of a licensed medical professional. Neither the presenter nor this broadcaster assume any responsibility for any adverse effects or consequences that may result.
Are you in the driver's seat of your life or the passenger seat? Sometimes we don't know until a serious threat of health comes our way and we have to take the wheel. That's exactly what Alicia Schneider had to do. As a Hollywood film producer, she was getting ready to marry John Schneider of Smallville and Dukes of Hazzard fame when stage 4 breast cancer became her new reality. But Alicia attacked it from a different angle, and she's about to give you a health awakening. Welcome to The Health Awakening. I'm Scott Laird. In 2019, Alicia Schneider got an unwelcome surprise, a diagnosis of stage 4 breast cancer. But she didn't panic. She started educating herself. And today she is cancer-free, not because she trusted in conventional cancer treatment and not because she trusted in natural cancer treatment. She is cancer-free because she put herself in the driver's seat, educated herself, and decided what was best for her. Alicia Schneider, welcome to The Health Awakening.
Hi there. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. So tell us about your work in Hollywood and meeting John Schneider. And if people don't know who John Schneider is, he's your husband and he is of Smallville and Dukes of Hazzard fame.
Yeah. I originally started in the motion picture industry in the 1980s and worked myself from a crew member to a producer and then ultimately running Robert Evans' company at Paramount Pictures. So I was definitely in the groove of putting together movies and packaging. And then in the early 2000, mid to late 2006, 2007, life changed for me and I went back home to raise my daughter. And I did so for a long time. And then in 2014, I decided to get back into the movie industry. Always kind of kept my hand in it. And when my daughter was fully grown, I said, Mom has done her job and I'm going back to do my passion. Had this great project, and the person that I wanted for the lead was John. And so I flew to Atlanta on my own money, bought him dinner, and convinced him to be in this little movie. And the rest is history since then. We've been working and having fun ever since.
Oh, wonderful. Love it. So now you guys got together, and of course, John was going through a rough time at the time, but unbeknownst to you, you were about to go through a rough time. So you were first diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. You didn't catch it until stage 4. Is that right?
Correct. So our life was just starting to settle down. John had a lot of drama with personal issues and also enormous floods that would just, he and I both went through that, our whole community. So we were just kind of coming out of that, starting to get air back underneath our wings, doing our passion project, Christmas Cars. And the day before we started shooting, or actually the day we started shooting, my bad, I was diagnosed with stage 4 HER2 negative hormone receptor positive cancer, and it had metastasized to the bones. And I looked like a lit up Christmas tree. And it dropped me to my knees. It dropped me to the point of, this can't be happening. This cannot be real. And then why now, God? And those were my big things. And then that switched into a pity party for a little bit, probably 2 nights of being angry, because I had finally had an alignment with someone that I loved and an alignment with someone that I was in a work relationship with too. And things were just great. And it was, why now? Why are you putting this obstacle? And then after 2 nights of that, of really me and myself and God and soul searching, then it was, okay, then God, let's do this. I'm not going to ask you for your mercy nor your grace. I want you to get me through this. Show me the right way so that I can be a servant and be a leader in this world that is just riddled. Every person I see now, it's like in every 1.3, every 3 households, you have 1.3 people that are affected by it. And it's everywhere. It's rampant. And how can that be? So that was my catalyst to get me going on the path.
So obviously you started doing research. You found out that cancer was everywhere. It wasn't just me. So did you start looking back into yourself going, well, is there something I did in my life that did this? Did you have those type of doubts and try and retrace your steps and figure out where this came from?
So there's a couple things. So one, I view the medical industry as a tool. So the first thing that I had really great doctor and oncologist, and they said, let's do a genetic marker. So we ruled that out immediately, that I didn't have a genetic biomarker, which I think is fantastic. The only reason why they gave me that, though, is because I was already stage 4. So if they have this technology, that should be standard of care. And that's one of my platforms, is that we have to raise standard of care in the United States. We're operating on things that are archaic from the 1940s. And I don't know about you, but I definitely vibrate higher than C average. So I started researching, and luckily my grandfather in the 1970s researched, and he believed in herbal medicines, and he also, he was a man of the Depression, and so they would go to the local veterinarian because we had animals, and a lot of times he would get his dosage for animals and sometimes take it for himself. So these all things kind of sat in the back of my mind as I'm doing myopically focused research, because there's so many different paths that you can take, and finding out what your cancer feeds on, what your cancer likes. Someone that has melanoma may not be the same path that mine is. So it's really doing an enormous amount of research, and then also asking the doctors. I did immunology. I chose not to do radiation. I chose not to do chemo. I did happen to do immunology. I met with the scientist that created that, Dr. Dennis Slayman. And they all told me that it wouldn't cure me. It would put a placeholder in my life. And I asked, and I said, well, is there nothing that I can do nutrition-wise, or is there any, nothing? And they all shook their heads, and they were like, just trust the system. And I'm like, well, this is unacceptable for me. And so the research started going more aggressive, and that just started my journey. And then the day that John and I got married, a dear, dear friend of mine came into my life, and, there's chaos around. We got married in front of God first before legally, because we just had some personal stuff going on. So our pastor married us. And my girlfriend says, I'm going to come back later. I was like, no. You obviously drove 40 minutes to come out here, that there's a message. Sit down with me. And so she shared with me, she says, God's already put you on your path. And she says that people are going to try and stray you from it. She goes, but trust in his word. And I went, because I was toying with a lot of things, and that affirmed me very quickly. It almost like put my feet on the ground.
Let me stop you there, Alicia. So we're talking about finding the path of your cancer and what to do about it, and getting aggressive with your own research. We'll be right back with more with Alicia Schneider on The Health Awakening. Stay with us. And welcome back to The Health Awakening. Before the break, we were talking with our guest, Alicia Schneider, about finding the path of your cancer and aggressiveness. Not aggressiveness in treatment necessarily, but education. So Alicia, a friend came to you, was it at your wedding, and said, trust God, essentially?
Yeah, she had forgotten that I was getting married that day. We had a small, intimate wedding, and for her to drive all the way out there had to be an intention. And this is a woman I've respected for many, many years. And she affirmed that the path that I was on, and I felt a sudden relief and almost felt grounded. And knowing that where we were going. And what happened also was that on this journey, once John and I decided that we were putting God first, and that we were going to use the system as a tool, and that we were going to set certain markers for us and goals. And those goals kind of kept everything in check. And when you're giving a diagnosis of stage 4, and it's an aggressive cancer, and they basically told me I was 3 years into a 5-year terminal, you have to act very quickly, right? You don't have time to try 6 weeks of something. It is, you've been given a death sentence, and you need to figure it out. And that's whenever the whole driver's seat thing started switching to me, because of the evasiveness of the team. The medical industry, was, well, you can take this pill, but they didn't believe in diet, or they didn't believe in other adjunct therapies. And for me, thank goodness my grandfather was who he was, and I was exposed to that at a very young age and willing to try it. When you're giving a death sentence, you're pretty much willing to try anything. I'd probably stand on my head, rub my tummy upside down, and whatever, Well,
I think we're finding that with what's going on in the world right now. A lot of off-label, quote-unquote, things are turning out to be great things. So that's where you talk about, instead of, you mentioned the driver's seat. So I'd like you to explain that how you found yourself using the example of a car. So you're not in the passenger seat and your oncologist is in the driver's seat. You switch that around. So how did you do that, and how did you decide which protocols to do?
So while I started down the path of trusting the doctors, because I know that I had to go through that phase of it, but there were also parts of me that I pulled back on life and said, let me collect more information. So I'm speed dating, along with producing a movie, along with trying to deal with the psychosis of being branded with the scarlet letter of C. So one of the things for me was I speed read Keto for Cancer, and I speed read How to Starve Cancer. That was one of my two big ones. And I also did the Gerson report. There's a lot of them I did, but I stuck to having cancer turn around and eat itself. So that was my goal. It's like, obviously, I did not have a genetic biomarker. So somewhere I had a break in the system. It could have been a trauma from a bad augmentation. I had a breast dog. I had an enormous amount of stress. I was exposed to a lot of mold. All of those things could have been critical to have anagenesis happen. One of the things that I read in the Keto for Cancer book is that cancer loved sugar. Okay. And so I'm processing an enormous amount of data, and I'm the type of person that reads 5 books at one time because I'm so scatterbrained. So as I'm going to get my PET scan, and this is like day 5 now, we've done mammogram, we've done PET scan, we've done breast tissue sample, and now it's going into PET scan. Well, for me, I still don't understand why we're doing mammograms. They're archaic and they cause damage. PET scans should be number 1, or sonograms, and then a PET scan. So I'm walking down this corridor and it says radiation this, radiation that. And I'm thinking that this woman, she puts me in the chair, puts the thing around my arm. And I'm like, oh, well, this is what it must feel like to be injected with stuff. And I looked at it, I said, is this radioactive? She's not wearing a mask, or she's not wearing anything except her scrubs. And she goes, no, this is activated glucose. Right?
That's your first clue.
Right? And so I go into the machine, and I understand that the machine picks up, it's a microwave, it picks up on glucose in the body. So that part of me, so let's say, well, if we know that glucose is sugar, and we know that disease picks up on sugar, then why are you giving me sugar?
Good point.
Right? I'm glad they gave me sugar to see it, because I honestly couldn't look at my first PET scan because it was so lit up red and orange, barely any yellow, very red, very orange, all over the body.
All right, so hold that thought. We have a couple of things that cancer doesn't like. I'm sure it's getting the wheels turning in people watching this. So we're going to come back and talk more about this with Alicia Schneider. We're talking about breast cancer and how to put yourself in the driver's seat. We'll be right back with more from The Health Awakening. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Health Awakening. Before the break, we were talking with our guest, Alicia Schneider, about her PET scan and how we saw it all lit up like red and green, like a Christmas tree, I think is how you term it, Alicia. And so how did you turn that? First of all, did that shock you? And then what did you do to turn it around?
At that point, I was like, okay, this is real. And I felt that I was going to outgrow my oncologist very quickly because I'm very pragmatically focused. So I ended up having a team. And then on the other side of it, it was unacceptable for me to just wait on the doctors. And that's whenever the transition of me getting in the driver's seat of my life. And it was a transition. And so once I figured out what process I was going to take, then it was my first goal was how to get my cancer to start eating its own blood supply. That was my number one thing. And I did that by cutting out all sugar, all root vegetables. From a society 100 years ago, an average non-obese person only ate 5 pounds of sugar a year. Now, an average non-obese person eats 150 pounds of sugar. There's not too many non-obese people walking around in the United States. We're gluttonous. And for me, shifting that was a critical thing. And I wasn't considered overweight. I was just average. So I was 139 pounds. I was a little bit more round. And my goal, John asked me, he says, what's your goal? And I said, I'd like to get down to 115. That was my ideal. And then once we got me down to 115, a healthy way, by eating really well and eating good fats and making sure that I ate my Brazil nuts with my potassium and magnesium and raising all those levels, and drinking my celery juice and doing all those kooky things that we do. Then my goal was to get down to 102 and sustain 102 for 3 months. And I did that really well with a lot of clarity, and a lot of little things like drinking hot water and all of these things to keep my metabolism and making sure that I fasted for a very long period of time, 18 hours, 20 hours, and then broke my fast with good fats and good nuts. And then I got into doing some risky stuff, stuff like Panicure. And I did not do ivermectin because mine had already went away by that time. I've already had 7 clear PET scans.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
And I've also switched over to doing infrared scans. And infrared scans is not accepted by modern medicine, but yet it's been widely used across the world in Australia and China and Japan. And I've done infrared. I do infrared heat therapy, but I also do an infrared body scan. And what I did was, once I had another clear PET scan, I went ahead and did an infrared scan. So I basically started my own baseline at infrared because I want to be in the driver's seat of my life. And I don't want to always get exposed to chemicals being injected into me or radiation and stuff like that. And infrared is not dangerous.
So where did you find infrared, by the way? It wasn't at your local hospital, was it?
No, not at all. So luckily because of my grandfather's influence, and then I had a salon spa, and I brought in a infrared heating system to Louisiana. I was one of the first ones in Louisiana had brought that in. That was like 2004, 2005, and it came out of Australia. And then I started down the rabbit hole of researching it. So how serendipitous was that it came back into my world? I also used to do cancer patients' hair when I opened my salon back. When I left Hollywood, I went back to doing something very simple. And then I ended up in the world of making women and men feel comfortable and beautiful about themselves. And I never charged them. And I had like Renata, the big wig maker in LA, make wigs for my friends and then help them through their journeys. So when I was diagnosed with stage 4, I went, oh, I already see the writing on this wall. That's why the headspace went really, really dark. And then I pulled myself out of that and then really pushed myself and told the oncologist, no, you move over. You're going to stay part of the team. But all you guys get in the back seat and one can be in the side seat, but I'm driving now.
I love it. Well, we're going to get more into that in a second here. So we're going to come back and talk about what you call the driven ribbon, speaking of even being in the driver's seat. So we'll be back with more from Alicia Schneider. Stay with us. Well, thank you for joining us today on The Health Awakening. We have just a minute left with our guest, Alicia Schneider. Alicia, you were talking about the driven ribbon, putting yourself in the driver's seat. First of all, what is the driven ribbon, the driven ribbon? And then secondly, what are some of the things real quick that you did?
I'm going to tell you real quick what we did, and then let's jump to the driven ribbon. So a lot of things that you need to do to get into the driver's seat of your life is make the commitment to yourself, honor yourself, get your heart rate up at least 3 times a week over 150. take at least 10,000 BTUs of D3. They already know this in the medical industry, and they're not prescribing stuff like this. Vitamins really, really help. Magnesium levels should go up to 1,000. Potassium, you should eat 4 Brazil nuts a day for potassium. You should get out and exercise, get moving. Don't sit there on the couch and look at your worries. Get out there and get active in your community. The Driven Ribbon came from me after coming off of a conference called The Truth About Cancer. And I went in and volunteered my time. And I thought I was going in there to talk about breast cancer. And then I realized that the driver's seat is really the platform. And the Driven Ribbon for me is all cancers. Because the formula works for all cancers. It's just what path you want to take, and it's just using the formula for your path. There's the Guernsey, there's the Gerson, there's what I did was how to starve cancer and keto for cancer. There's a lot of things. I also did things that you could get at the veterinarian store, So there's a lot of different paths.
Interesting. So Alicia, I think we've just scratched the surface here, and we would be robbing our audience if we did not talk more about this. So if you're willing, we'll come back and we'll do some more of this on what we call the MichaelRood.tv app. That's where you can find more about this. So Alicia, would you be okay doing a bonus episode with us?
Sounds great.
All right, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. Our guest has been Alicia Schneider. You can discover more about her story and the CBD product we never even got to that she and her husband, John Schneider, developed called CBOD. Clever. And his work at johnschneidercbod.com. All right, thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for another Health Awakening. Thank you for joining us today on The Health Awakening. You can catch the replay of this episode and see our complete show archive at healthawakening.tv. For more information about our guests today and all they have to offer, please visit their website on the bottom of your screen. And please remember, the information you saw today is intended for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice, nor do the views expressed reflect those of this broadcaster. Should you choose to implement this information, please do so only with the assistance of a licensed medical professional. Neither the presenter nor this broadcaster assume any responsibility for any adverse effects or consequences that may result.